Welcome, ladies. We're so excited to have you. I'd love for each of you, just because we do have some people who are new to the network and some who've been with us for a while, have each of you kind of do a brief introduction of who you are. And we'll go ahead and start with Brandeis.
Hi, I'm Brandeis Hall. Nice to meet you. If you've seen it spelled and want to say Brandeis, that is the name of the university. My parents were California in the 60s, so it's pronounced Brandeis. I am the founder of Brandeis Speaks, and oh gosh, have been a woman my entire life, have been a woman in leadership for a number of years. And boy, do we have some stories to tell about the power of words in the leadership environment. Tammy, off to you.
Well, I love the energy that we're going to bring today. Of course, I had the pleasure of meeting Brandeis at one of the Rising Above summits, and so it's great to be in this arena. I am Tammy Wellbrock, and I'm the founder of Girl Twin Solutions, a coaching training. I'm still trying to figure out exactly what I want to be when I grow up, but I really am passionate about helping people be better versions of themselves. And part of that passion is, of course, back to I'm also a woman my whole life. So, women and empowering and helping them achieve what they need to achieve, want to achieve, reach those goals is also a big part of my Girl Twin Solutions. But I part of the reason why I think we landed on this topic of power of words was, is it, what's the month here in April, Jen? We're
It's
celebrating
Poetry Month.
Poetry Month, yes. So we're not going to do any poems, but the power of words, I tell a lot of my friends, numbers are not my thing, but words are. I love the way we can put them together as a puzzle almost and come up with different impact, different influences, different outcomes because of the words we choose. I also am proud to say I have a master's in communication, yet I'm still trying to master the art of communication. It is one of the most complex things that I think we as humans encounter. And so, but yet we don't necessarily put as much intentionality into it, I think, that we should. So I'm glad we're here today to talk about some of that. So, oh, sorry.
I'm so
We're
sorry.
going back to
I was
Jen.
just mesmerized by your words, Tammy, that I got a little bit spaced for a second, so I apologize. I
We're
I
very
wanted
formal
to-
here, as you can see. Yeah.
That's my save, right? I wanted to start this off with, like, the importance of words, and why do you believe that choice of words is crucial in leadership? What is your thoughts on that?
I mean, I'm again fascinated with how different words, yes, they have different definitions, duh, Tammy, but they also have different emotional context applied to them. Some are just by their very nature triggering, and some trigger people because of their filters, influences, experience, etc., on how they are kind of interpreting that word. And so being able to really think clearly about the word choices you have, I think is going to impact other people differently. And so we're all going to bumble. I'm a master at bumbling, but again, I think that I'm going to say this a lot, and I say it a lot in my videos, intentionality. And the more that you can be upfront and forthright in picking words, selecting words to try to just help people fully understand your intention as well as your overall goals and vision. What do you think, Brandis?
You're absolutely right. And in leadership, we often stew, fret, overthink about the perception of us as leaders. In fact, my tendency is I've got this down. I chew all the flavor out of a problem and then I stick it in my hair because that's always such a productive solution. But I digress. When you are a leader, you have the power to empower people, to draw the best from them. You can't motivate them, but you can tap into their internal loci of motivation and get them to follow you and it makes everything much more productive and easier. You also have the power to wound, to hurt, to demean, to put down, and get the worst out of people. People don't leave jobs and leaders because usually they hate the job. They usually leave because of a bad manager, a bad leader. They don't feel that they're being heard. And you realize how powerful the words that leader uses are. Also, when we think about women and leadership, if you're articulate, you are perceived as being very intelligent. And with some colleagues, not all, but some, there is a tendency to try to one down you and to assume you're not as intelligent as they are based on physical features or lack of them. I think about what you think with, right? Then there is the power of women sometimes to one down ourselves.
That's where I
To
was
be
going to go.
tentative, to be hesitant, to be, well, maybe this would be, I believe that, I hope that, these are hedge words. And I deal with salespeople all the time. I'm like, lose that. Probably, maybe, kind of, possibly. We try to soften what we're saying. And again, sometimes gender plays into this. We don't want to put ourselves as forward. We don't want to be perceived as aggressive. And so we lack the functionality to be assertive in our language, because again, we're overthinking it. We're putting all the flavor out of it and sticking it in our hair, which again is not helpful to us. Whereas some of our other colleagues, they don't really think about it at all. You're like, you guys need to think about it. But can't say that, HR's coming. But I think it just comes forward without all that self-questioning.
That I have found, of course, and I think let's do the caveat for our attendees: do as we say, not as we do, because I am one of the worst at softening my language, doing the, like you said, I might, I feel, I think. I use a lot of sensory words versus bold, powerful statements. I can't think of anything right now, but certainly being able to realize, where are you at in your own mess? How are you contributing to the way other people may be perceiving you? And I think so much we want to put the ownership on other people. Oh, they're thinking of me in a bad way. No, maybe we need to internalize and think about, what can we control, and we can control the words we choose.
Yes.
And of course, this is more about this. The context of this webinar is certainly over verbiage, language, the word. And we all know that the body language and all those nuances and things are also coming at play. I think that can be a separate webinar. We could certainly
Yeah,
go into that
absolutely.
deeper. But just that, the power of word, and being able to really stop and think about, how do you say it? What is it that you're saying? And could you say it in a more confident manner? I agree. I think a lot of, well, let's just say women in leadership, I think, do that. New leaders, when you're questioning your own abilities, it tends to happen. And we bring PTSD from other situations, and we're maybe thinking, that phrase really ticked off somebody at my old job, I'm going to say it differently this time. I mean, and it is somewhat of an experiment, like a scientist. You
Yeah.
tweak your variables and you try different things. But if the words you choose this time do not make that or help the other person understand fully, why then do you repeat the same words? Because you can't just say it louder and they can understand it better. I know you have a story there,
Well,
Brandon.
because anybody with kids gets that. Anybody
Yeah.
with kids is, I've told you a million times, but you're right. We said it the exact same words, the exact same way, the exact same. And it doesn't matter if it's leaving the light on the refrigerator door open, putting your underwear in the hamper, I mean, whatever it is, anybody who's been around kids, had kids, we all know the phrase, and yet we translate that to the workplace. And we'll say the same thing in the same way a million times and then wonder why people don't get it. It's like, well, I should probably adjust, first of all, how I'm saying it, but also maybe analyze. Let's see, I go, maybe also analyze a bit. I try to lead by bad example. Analyze a bit what it is we're trying to get them to do. What is the end result we want? And if we build people up, if we unharness their imagination, if we help our colleagues of all genders be more visionary, be more fearless, then everybody has more success. Now, there will be more mistakes, but listen, as long as the mistake is interesting, I mean, that's all I ask. Don't make the same mistakes over and over. And I mean, if you can make it where it's just like, wow, that was terrible, but so impressive that, I mean, make a mistake that's a wonder to behold, because at least it's entertaining, if nothing else.
I do have somebody who just sent me a text, one of our viewers. And they are asking, is there a difference in how you might choose language in written communication versus one-on-one versus a group setting?
Oh, absolutely. And part of that is just you have the time to structure your words. I really love to write, and I sometimes will, I believe, create a stronger message. I get rid of those mights and shoulda, woulda, couldas, and I believe my writing tends to be more confident. Unfortunately, with writing, you don't get the immediacy of the reaction, and therefore if you see them pause and not, looking confused, then usually you fill in those gaps to try to clear up misunderstandings. You don't have that with obviously the written word. And then in the spoken word, I I am amazed at how fluent I am in what I call Kansas Hick. And so I don't write in Kansas Hick, but I really do speak in, the colloquial type phrasing that doesn't always translate to different generations or to different cultures. And so, but I think I think it's more, I mean, when it's spoken, it's in the moment. So you don't have the opportunity necessarily to craft your message as well.
Mm.
But the flip side, you have the ability to address confusion, misunderstandings, uh, upset emotions based on what you perceive right then and there. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. And you're right on the money with when you're talking one-on-one, you're far more colloquial. I mean, we are here. Now, if you say something wrong, it's a little hard on the take back. You don't always think it through before it comes flying out of your mouth. And my filter isn't always what it should be. And you're right about cultures. When I was doing radio in Europe, and the general manager I had recruited from Dallas, there were only two of us. There were like 9 Brits, 8 Australians. It was an English language radio station in Switzerland. But there were only 2 of us, and we were from Texas, 2 Americans, and they referred to us as the Texas Mafia, which we thought was really amazing that with only 2, we could be the Mafia. But we had to learn very quickly to quit using sports metaphors we weren't aware we were using. So it's a home run, touchdown, and everybody would just stare at us. It's like, oh, culturally we need to. So we learned to say goal, and somehow it just wasn't as fulfilling. So sometimes we aren't thinking about what it is we're trying to communicate. And in person, there's far more danger of that. But like you said, you can read reactions, you can adjust what you're saying. Written language, you can certainly say exactly what you mean to say with everything you need to say and hope that they're going to read past the first sentence. I'm like you, much more articulate in the written language, but much more formal. And if I'm angry, OMG, I'm amazingly articulate and it sounds like a law firm. I learned never send an email you've written while in anger, but they're beautiful to behold. I mean, wow. Harvard should have accepted me. And there's also, of course, the perception, written or verbal, because if the hedge words are popping in, the perception that you're, unsure of yourself, the perception, I'm always joking, so that perception maybe you're not as serious as you should be, or taking it as seriously as my training style is very informal. That doesn't appeal to everyone, but it's fun. Written, it's harder to do that. Also, as we deal with multiple generations, I had to learn when I have teenagers, I text correct. I backspace and put in the commas, change the capitals. I text like I write because I'm old school, right? but that means the punctuation is there. And I discovered my teenagers thought I was angry because I put a period at the end of each sentence. Something that would never have occurred to me because that's just proper grammar. But they had to come tell me, are you angry? Because there's a period. And it's like, I had no idea. So even keeping up with the nuances of written language, and I've received emails from people who are a generation or so behind me, and it's like, oh my goodness, where's the punctuation? Where I know you went to school, you surely know this. See, that would come out my mouth. That would not come out that way in a written. I would have replied, please add punctuation and proper grammar.
And it's funny
It
because
definitely has an effect. No, go ahead. I just wanted to, yeah.
well, and there are times where I will speak verbally with, one-on-one with people, and then the written email one-on-one, and they're not consistent in the manner in which they're portraying the person I'm visiting with. And I tend to then put an emotion into my interpretation that they're mad at me, they're rude, they're jerks, whatever. And I then, and it's always negative,
Always, yes.
unfortunately. And I have started realizing, I start questioning their ability to maybe write because more people, I think, are comfortable talking verbally than they are written words. And a lot of times and of course, when I have an individual in my mind right now that I communicate with a lot, and I was just perpetually ticked at this individual because of the manner in which the emails came. They were kind of rude, how I took it, very curt, very concise. He hates to write.
Yeah.
So I then started realizing he's not conveying anything deeper. It was just his manner of, choosing words. So I think too, now what I've done with this individual is I now try to visit face to face
Yeah.
or over the phone or whatever. And so because it's such a healthier interaction, but back to the generational thing though, I remember my mother-in-law asking me if I was going to be home on a particular day, and I said, "Oh yeah, I'm just going to slob today." And she took that as I was going to be busy. And I'm like, "Slob? I'm not doing any, I'm going to be a slob." And so and then you realize different words mean different things to different generations. So
Well, and very often when we're trying to, as we look at the idea of communicating effectively,
mhm.
one thing I found works for me, especially when you're about to have a difficult conversation with someone. And those are the most challenging because face to face emotions do start getting in the way, even in writing, right? I found that if I wrote out the conversation I wanted to have, it helped me plan how I said it. It helped me contain my emotions. It helped me be very specific about the behavior that needed to be adjusted and why it needed it, what it was costing the company, what it was costing that person, how it was getting in the way, rather than you're a jerk, stop doing that, you're making me crazy, which I would have said. Once I'd written that out and figured out what words I wanted to use, then I did not send it. I had the conversation in person because a difficult conversation should be in person.
Yeah.
Absolutely, because people do, just like we do, you start thinking that there are intentions that there aren't, or you want them to miss the ones that are.
Yeah.
So you have but at least now you've got your words, and it may not be perfect, and you can nuance, you can answer questions. Then after the difficult conversation, I go back to the original thing I wrote, I adjust it as needed, and I send the follow-up email to the person with whom I've had the conversation. And I say, as per our conversation, that way now you've documented you had a conversation, you've documented the message, and it gave you a chance to clarify after. So if anything one-on-one didn't get understood or wasn't communicated effectively, it's in that message, but I've also had a chance to alter the message based on the one-on-one experience. Certainly it takes more time, but if I'm investing in my people and want the best from them and that they would get the best from me, it's worth the investment.
That is really astute advice. And there's something about that activity of pre-writing a response. And that could be whether it's difficult or not, but sometimes like during staff meetings that I'm leading, I would get stumped repetitively, and I wanted to handle it better in future interactions. So then I have prepared different responses. I actually did this when I was on our school board, and I had a very aggressive individual that was my board peer, and I wasn't, when I'm getting flustered and getting frustrated, I do not think as well, and I certainly didn't want to knee jerk, and especially when it's recorded and live. And at that point, I created I always called it words in my pocket.
Right.
And the activity of pre-writing, even if I never do anything with it again, it locked deeper into my mind, and it just helped give me more direction, more composure and poise, I believe. And 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 I may never have used that writing again. It was just the act of writing. And then, of course, like you said, when it's difficult, especially when you're managing and you need to have journal, it continues to reaffirm, are you understanding what I need you to know, and how maybe the seriousness of the
And
situation.
sometimes, ladies, we know that leadership can not always have a title behind it. Being a leader in your company, or it can be um, just who you are inherently. But what if you're somebody who's in a situation where they're not in a title, but something happens, within a meeting or whatever, and they need to address that leader, but they are fearful of how they could, choose their words wisely or address that individual in a way that's not going to come off um, attacking to that manager or supervisor, but it could be a tough conversation. What would be some of your advices that you would give to kind of help them approach that type of a communication or a conversation?
But one of the words that I have as both a manager and as a, call it a subordinate. And of course, and let me also say, leadership and roles of authority are not necessarily the same.
Mhm.
I agree with you. And people can still do the act of leadership, regardless of their role. But with that being said, I utilize the word trend, and I really embrace trends. I have found if you start highlighting one specific event, people then can, they argue it. And then now you're into a pointing fingers, and it's like it's not how you handled that one event, it's numerous events. And the picture that's painted is the trend I want to address. And so sometimes what I have found, that trend is actually easier received by the recipient because they're not coming so much on the defense. A trend indicates that this is repetitive behavior. A trend indicates that I'm seeing a pattern, and then I'm forecasting that that pattern is going to continue. And so we need to stop that trend. Not and frankly, I don't think most people, whether regardless of what position, if it's above or below in the nature of which you're talking in hierarchy, at that point, I do think people can handle that a little differently. That's just one thing I have found. There's lots of other advice, but
Well, yeah.
I guess, what are
And
your thoughts?
the first thing on that, Tammy, is that like you said, you lead where you are. The title of authority, and a lot of us tend to try to define. And again, corporations, businesses tend to be very structured, tend to be very top down, and we start adjusting ourselves and bending ourselves into that, not always realizing sometimes we need to bend it to us because we're the living, breathing thing that's growing in there. The corporation is a concept, not a real thing, and certainly not a person. But I digress. So you lead where you are. Leaders rise. The next leaders, they're watching you rise where you are. So always, if you're a natural born leader, you will always find a way to lead. Even if you're not, sometimes you have to lead for self-preservation. And so it can depend on who you're talking to. But if I need to go to a boss, my manager, and have a conversation, um, that might be a little different than I would with a colleague or a subordinate. But if I take the time, which I confess I don't always think to do, What do I want out of this? So that I know what I'm trying to get. I'm not just going in defensive, angry, all the things that are not helpful and poisoning things. Take a walk, calm down. What do I want from this conversation? If I need a behavior to stop, how do I want to get that? And then I remember to reverse course. That person's going to be thinking about what's in it for them. What's in it for them? And if all they're getting is my anger, vitriol, they're going to get defensive. So I have had this situation many years ago with a boss who tended to just yell at me all the time. I mean, she yelled at me because the sun came up. She yelled at me because the leaves were falling. She yelled at me if the stars came out. It just seemed to be her way of communicating. So first I talked to HR and said, I'm going to have this conversation. I don't need you to be there. And they were like, oh, thank you. And I said, but if I'm on the wrong track, tell me now before I have the conversation. So then I had the next time the boss called and started in, I said, I need you to stop. And I interrupted. And I said, okay, you want something from me. And you're not getting it, so you're angry. But I need you to stop shouting at me. Because when you shout at me, the shields go up and everything just bounces off and you cannot get what you want from me. I want to give you what it is you want from me. I cannot if you're shouting at me. So I need you to stop shouting at me. See, there it was. I need you. So actually this boss, she said, okay, this is me not shouting at you. And then she says, why are we doing this? It's still kind of hostile. And then I said, oh, well, the reason is because of what we did before. And this is what we're, she's like, oh, well, then, well, can we do it this other way now? And I'm like, sure. She's like, okay. So nearly every conversation after that began when I pick up the phone with this particular boss, she would start with, okay, this is me not shouting at you. But we actually developed a very good working relationship from that. Now, a colleague who is constantly condescending in meetings, constantly demeaning, that's a different conversation. But instead of going and say, I need you to quit doing this, go in, have a few minutes with them and say, I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt, even though you know they don't deserve it. Okay, I'm not sure you're aware of this, but when you say example, it comes off very condescending. I perceive you dislike me, which is fine, but your dislike of me is showing itself to everyone and it's making you look bad. So I wanted to bring this to your attention so that in the future, if you have something to say in the meeting, check the the word I was just laying there, right?
The tone,
condescension. Yeah. Thank you, not condensation. Check your condescension toward me, because I'm going to let it roll off of me. I lied. And it's making you look petty and poorly.
Yeah.
Just wanted to let you know. And amazingly, the behavior changed. This person did try to come tell me, I don't dislike you, which I knew was not true. But we ended up with a better working relationship. We were never going to be friends. But the condescension stopped because when I directed it, it makes you look petty and makes you look poorly. This person cared very much about themselves and their image, hence why they were always condescending to me. Because I was 10 times smarter and more talented.
Great example. Just some of this interaction with all three of us, I believe that there are two, let's say, extroverted women in this webinar and one who's not. And so, Jen, I'm going to put you a little bit into the introvert category. Yeah. But yet, I'm sure the listeners have caught on that Jen is one of the most articulate people. You are so well spoken, and I really admire that about you. One of the things that I, as an extroverted person, has really been back to intentionality in not using words. In other words, I tell myself, shut up. It's time to be quiet, Tammy. Let's now engage other people who haven't shared their words. And I've really tried to be strategic with that, that is not, silence is my kryptonite. I have to fill it up. And and I'm not comfortable with the silence because it's too awkward for me. And then I start to babble and get nervous and blah. And so I'm curious though, when there is an aspect of introversion, extroversion, how do you feel like that plays? And I'm curious about both of you in this answer. How do you feel that characteristic, personality trait, whatever, impacts words?
Ah, I mean, I've been in situations where I would love to speak, but it doesn't always, I'm not always granted that opportunity. Um, I think that I've learned through time and putting self-confidence into myself that my words have impact, that I would want to stand up and speak in situations and feel more confident in that. I used to be very fearful. I'd be the wallflower in the corner, who would, I'm a people pleaser at heart. So, it's like if I felt like I was going to be upsetting somebody or rocking the boat in any way, I would rather keep my thoughts to me and not, in fear of making someone else feel a certain way. But I think that as you progress in just life in general, not just in like your profession, um, I've just grown into my confidence of I do have good ideas, and whether or not they all speak or they all land in situations, feeling that what I says has impact and matters. I think that, and believing that in myself helps others want to be receptive to that. I think that, and to the point of you all saying, well, if you think and all that, well, that just brings people to want to shut you down faster. So, but it takes time to have that built within you. I think that true introverts, it's just not going to be something that they're tomorrow going to be like, okay, I was told in a series to stand up and say my voice, and they're just going to go ahead and be that person. Um, but I think it's also the environment in which they're in, and if they get into a company that is encouraging of them and is supportive of that, and kind of helps them along the way, it'll help them bring that self-confidence up to hopefully where they can feel valued in their voice and speak.
Yeah.
Jen,
And
you hit on
asking
a
them there to
very
share is a
powerful.
big part. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, see, Tammy and I are the same. We feel the silence. I'm like the progressive ads turning into my parents. I have to feel the silence. It's like the guy at the gas station. It's like, oh my gosh, that's me. It's so embarrassing. Talk to strangers. Roll down the window. Nice car. It's like so bad. Embarrass my kids. But Jen, you bring up a wonderful point. Leadership is not necessarily about extroverts, although we naturally seem to land there. And when you're an introvert, it definitely has an effect that can play to your confidence. One thing both extroverts and introverts share, and people are surprised to find out about extroverts, is that we all suffer from imposter syndrome. Mm-hmm. We all suffer from self-doubt. We all suffer from, there's a few people who don't, but for the most part, most people, when they're alone in their head, and those of us who burble too much are, oh, I shouldn't have said that, shouldn't have said that, shouldn't have said that, where Jen is like, I should have said that, I should have said that, I should have said that. Mm-hmm. Two sides of the same coin. Now, Jen, I've known you a long time, and I've watched you grow in confidence. And where extroverts tend to fake the confidence and just throw it out there, introverts often do the same thing extroverts do, of demeaning themselves. Nobody wants to hear what I say. And again, the hedge words. We have to learn to quit with the hedge words. I think, I feel, well, maybe this is important to you. And then somebody starts talking over us, whether they mean to or not, and we go, and we shut ourselves down or let ourselves be shut down. Jen, I've watched you become bolder in your thoughts, bolder in your opinions. You still are not an extroverted talker, but you have started to identify your right to be seen, your right to be heard, that your answers, your thoughts and ideas are valid and meaningful, and often a solution the talkers are missing because we're all so busy talking. Setting boundaries for yourself is part of leadership, and introverts who let themselves be run over, that's not about being an introvert, that's about setting that healthy boundary. And I've watched you come forward where you've thought about what you wanted to say, so you've lost your hedge words, and you put it out there. You've also gotten better when extroverts start talking over and you feel start pushed down. You don't just shut up anymore. You're like, wait, I'd like to finish what I was saying here. And then we're all, whoa, okay. So you are bolder in recognizing your badass self.
Oh,
that as an introvert, you're still a badass. You're still valid. You're still meaningful. And now you're realizing what you have to say needs to be heard. And sometimes the person who rarely says anything, when they harness that, is the person most listened to. Because it's like, oh my gosh, Jen has something to say. We rarely hear from her. So let's listen because it must be important. And you're getting when you hold people up and say, stop. Go ahead.
You are so astute. Everybody needs like a healthy dose of Brandeis to pump them up, and you really captured Jen there. But I also think something that I think introverts do better is choosing better timing, because when as extroverts, it's in my head and it's out of my mouth. And even if it's the best word choice ever, if it's not the right time, it's not going to have the same impact. And so that may be the benefits. Both have their place, and both bring such great skills. They have advantages and disadvantages. And so thank you for sharing that. Jen, what do you just bringing it back to you, see what you
Yeah, no,
have
I
to
just
say.
think that it's like I said, the best conversations I've had are with extroverts. And I think that it's just more of like if you have the people who are able to give you your space and audience as you grow, then you're gonna really come with really great ideas and concepts and like that's where true like growth personally professionally happens is when you're able to have that synergy with different personality types. And so no, I totally agree. And I know we're getting up on time, but I know that we did ask our our people to join in on a poll, and the question that we did throw out there before the session was what do you find most challenging about communication and leadership. And right now, the leader is, I kind of, it was managing difficult conversations, which I think is kind of in tune with what we're saying, followed by managing clarity and then active listening. So that's kind of like how it's ranking out in terms of how people are saying, you know, what they find challenging, you know, in communication. And I think that that is something that is, no matter what, you know, gender, it's going to be universal because conflict situations are always difficult for me to have. And I'm sure it is for you as well.
Well,
I think they are for everybody. Yeah.
I'd like to share an example that fits into that very briefly. When I used to lead Rising Through the Ranks for the Radio Advertising Bureau, a women's leadership course, 25 badass women rising in leadership received scholarships to come to the program. And we would have different guest speakers each year. I was in the room and we had a big conference table with seats around it. And then we had some seats around the wall for often the speakers were sitting around there. And there was a group of these young women coming in, and especially the younger, I noticed, would come in the room, look around, and then they'd take a seat along the wall, leaving all the seats at the conference table. And one of the guest speakers came in and she to get her session ready, and she looked around and she saw this, and she suddenly stopped everybody. She said, ladies, I see you all sitting in the chairs along the wall. Why are you sitting in the chairs along the wall? She was bold, right? And they all just stared at her, mouths agape. And she said, are you waiting for other people to come in who are more worthy than you are to sit at the table? And I suspect when you're back in your stations and your offices that you do this in the conference room and you let the dudes come in and they just walk in and take a seat at the table. They don't even look at the seats on the wall. But this is all women, and you've all sat here and you're going to default to other people you don't even know being more worthy to sit at the table. Why are you doing that?
Wow.
You're worthy to be here. And again, they all just were staring at her in awe. And then she suddenly said, flailing her arms and gesturing toward them, she goes, sit at the damn table. And in one move, everybody jumped up and rushed and sat at, and as other people came in later, they were stuck at the wall.
Yeah.
And every year we did that session of Rising Through the Ranks, there was always a catchphrase that picked up. And that one became the one for everybody that I've carried with me the rest of my life, even though I was one of the leaders. Sit at the damn table. And as women, we tend to not, But Jen, as you were saying, as introverts, when we're looking for managing difficult conversations, we start one downing ourselves because A, we don't want to do it, it's uncomfortable, we don't want to hurt anybody. When we need to have that clarity, we can muck it up and make things muddy because we don't want to say the wrong thing. So we hem and haw around it. When we need to persuade people, same thing. And sometimes we have to grab ourselves by the lapels and say, sit at the damn table.
Yeah.
Have
Don't
the
wait to be
difficult conversation
invited.
because that's part of being a leader. Be
Yeah.
clear. And yes, some people are going to get their nose out of joint, their feelings hurt, and you manage that as best you can, but you can't always control that because some people just choose to be upset or they need time to chew all the flavor out and stick it in their hair. Same thing with the active listening. When you step up to the table, it puts you in a position of hearing what's coming back to you. Because you've stepped into the position of leadership, whether introvert, whether extrovert, whether young, whether a position of authority or not, the leadership comes from within and the power is in you, in your words, and in stepping into the position and leading where you are to become an agent of change wherever you are planted.
I love that. And I'd also say, if indeed we are shying away from those difficult conversations because we don't want to hurt somebody's feelings, but then their behavior gets them fired, what is going to hurt that friend more? Being fired, let go, or you giving them some tough love? And so, and I didn't I didn't have every person that reported to me appreciate my tough love. They didn't see that intent. I knew what I meant. I really wanted to help them be, again, the best potential they were, and wanted to save them in their careers. And a lot of them did not appreciate hearing the tough stuff, and it, you know, they may have been let go by me, or they may have been let go by somebody else. And I'm glad to say though that a good chunk of the people I've let go have come back and thanked me because I did tell them some stuff. They started seeing that word trend in other positions, and they realized they needed to be the one to change, and they remembered my words, and it kind of came full circle. And so if you really do care about the people that you're trying not to hurt, maybe you're hurting them worse by not saying anything. And no one wants to have a difficult conversation. So I mean, so to think that other people want it or should do it is just a cop out. I mean, and I have become I've embraced the thinking that I believe my care and my sensitivity, my empathy is actually going to lead this difficult conversation better than maybe others would. And so why not make it me? I don't want to do it, but it needs to be done. And I know I'm going to say it kinder, the tough love, than other people. So
Yeah.
I'm going to guess a lot of the people listening are that person too.
Yeah.
Jen, you just had a light bulb moment, I can tell.
No, I just feel like I have had people where I was reflecting back that I've had to have situations with and had to do write-ups and all the things, and um, wasn't their favorite person during that whole process and even after for quite a while. But then, life will happen, and several years later, they'll come back and say, one who just never would show up to work on time is coming to mind. And I'm like, you've got to be on time. And she was young, she was just out of high school, and she just didn't want to show up. And, she's like, you taught me how to be on time. And, I realized that really was a skill because, that I was her first job. And so, I was like the mean mom in a sense to this, at going and just like pointing out things that, they didn't see, but it really did help them develop later on. So, yes, I feel that it's, it's all in care. If you truly show that you are doing it with a good intention or a care, even though it's a difficult conversation, I think down the line, they're going to see that and be in better thinking of you better. But if you are malicious the whole way through, probably not. They're probably going to be the opposite. So I've had managers that were on that side of the spectrum too. So, but yes, it's all in your intent and all in your words. we are running up on time. So I would just say, um, one last question that, has come through, and it's just more of like, for women in leadership, a lot of industries are very male dominated. What would a final thoughts on, how these women leaders can help mentor each other, find their language? Like, are there resources that you would recommend them doing, or like a certain mentor that's helped you, that, a book or anything that you might want to, like, give as a piece of advice?
I've done a lot of the women in leadership, taught some classes on it, and the sad truth is women do compete with men for different jobs. We've got that dynamic, but the other dynamic that we have is we're competing with other women who are oftentimes tearing us down more so than our male counterparts. And so if you can be the person to support other women, kudos to you. And why we can't do that as our gender is really a frustrating aspect. But there's that. But also, I did read this that in a lot of women don't feel like they're heard in, or that they may make a statement and then their male peer comes back, says the other, says it again, and oh, that's the best idea ever, and I just said it. And so one of the things that was happening in President Obama's uh, group, that he had several women in his advisory group. I'm sorry, I don't remember which one, but the women often felt like they were being looked over, not called upon, not, not heard. Their male peers taking the suggestion and making it their own, that type of stuff. They got together and they said, we need to magnify each other's voices. And they came up then in those meetings. If Jill said this great idea, Sally came back and said, that's a great idea, and would keep, and then, Susie would come and say, and they then just brought attention to their female peers. I love that example because it's women supporting women. It's not male bashing, it's just helping those good ideas come to the surface. They eventually did talk to President Obama and mention that, hey, we feel like we're being overlooked. And then he then intentionally started drawing them out by individuals, and asking them for their input. But it started with them. You got to focus on what you can control. And that was one that you can do. You can't always get the person leading the meeting to call on you. But I have often not leading a meeting, but being observant of other people and seeing somebody have that light bulb moment and calling, hey, I'm seeing Jen react to that. I'd like to hear what she says. And that's things you can do to help bring back those power of words with the other individual, the other women.
I think that's a perfect cap on the discussion, Tammy. Very articulate, wonderful. This is why we all love and adore you so much. So
I've paid her to say that.
Ah,
Thank
well,
you.
well, wonderful.
So,
I know, like, we're on time, but thank everybody for joining us today. We always encourage everyone to reach out to us on LinkedIn, connect with us there. I will, send a follow-up. Brenda Speaks. It's Brandeis' new company. Her email, I'll send that out. If you want to reach out to her or Tammy, I'll give, their contact information. They'd love to continue the conversation. I know sometimes questions in this arena can be difficult, and they don't, always want to express them on a live situation, but they'd love to be able to help you. Keep a lookout for them. They both have channels here on 10-Minute Trainer Network with really great content. Brandeis is going to be starting to put some really good content in the next few weeks out for us. But she also has our Rising Above pieces that are available now on 10-Minute Trainer Network. And yeah, we do have another live that's going to be happening in May, and that's going to be with Eric Thurwanger. He is, he does leadership as well, but he, the piece that he's going to talk to us is going to be on sales based. And it's, how to, do more of like the power words, in your messages in a sales aspect. So we're excited to have him. All that information is available on our landing page on 10-Minute Trainer Network. So again, I'm so excited. Thank you both for just taking the time to be with us today. And thank everybody for joining us, and have a wonderful rest of your week.
Yes, happy
See you
happy
soon.
April.
Happy April.